Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Easy English Podcast. I'm Hana, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Alex.
Hi, Hana, and a huge welcome to all of our listeners around the world. I am so excited for today's episode because we're tackling a topic that many of you have asked for. It's a classic grammar puzzle.
Yes, today we are looking at the big battle, present perfect versus present perfect continuous. I know, just hearing those grammar names can make your head spin a little bit, but don't worry, we are going to make it super simple today.
That is the plan. No long, boring grammar tables, just real-life examples and some easy tricks to help you choose the right one every single time you speak.
Perfect. Let's start with a classic situation. Alex, imagine I walk into your living room and there is a very strong smell of fresh paint. The walls are a beautiful new blue color. You are holding a paintbrush and you have some blue paint on your t-shirt. What do you say to me?
Yes. In this situation, I would look at you, point to my messy shirt, and say, I have been painting the living room.
Right. I have been painting the living room. That is the present perfect continuous. But what if the room is completely finished? The paint is dry, the brushes are washed and put away, and the room looks perfect. What do you say then?
In that case, I would proudly say, I have painted the living room. This is the present perfect simple.
Okay, I think I see the difference, but let's break it down for our listeners. Why did you use have been painting in the first situation and have painted in the second one?
It all comes down to what we want to focus on. In the first story, with the wet paint and my dirty t-shirt, the painting activity was recently happening. It might not even be finished yet. The focus is on the activity itself and its clear result in the present, the smell of paint and my messy clothes. So I have been painting emphasizes the process, the action itself.
So the action is what matters, and it might still be going on, or it just finished and we can see the physical evidence of it right now.
Exactly. Now, in the second story, the job is 100% complete. The room is done. I want to show you the final result. I don't care about the messy process anymore. I just want to say, look, the job is finished. That is why I say, I have painted. The focus is on the completed result.
That makes so much sense. So if I want to focus on the activity, the effort, or the time spent, I use the continuous form with ing, like have been painting. But if I want to focus on a completed result, I use the simple form, like have painted.
Spot on, Hana. You nailed it. Let's try another everyday example to really make this clear. Imagine you love reading. You have a big, thick book on your desk. You started it last week and you are currently on page 150. How would you explain this to a friend using our two tenses?
Let me try. Since I started last week and I am still in the middle of reading it, I should use the continuous form, right? So I would say, I have been reading a great book lately.
Perfect. Because the reading is an ongoing activity. It is not finished yet. Now, what if you reach the very last page, close the book, and put it on your shelf? What do you say then?
Then I would use the simple form because it's finished. I would say, I have read that book.
Exactly. I have read that book means it is done, finished, a complete experience in your life. But I have been reading that book means you are still in the middle of it.
You know, Alex, when I was learning this, I used to think that the continuous form was only for things that are literally happening at this exact second. But here, I have been reading doesn't mean I have the book in my hands right now while I'm talking to you. It just means it's a general project in my life recently.
That is a fantastic point, Hana, and it is a mistake a lot of learners make. They think continuous always means right now. But with the present perfect continuous, it often just means around this time or recently. For example, if I say, I've been going to the gym a lot lately, I am not standing on a treadmill right now. I'm sitting here talking to you. but it's a temporary, ongoing activity in my life these days.
By the way, if you are enjoying our conversation today, taking a second to subscribe or like this episode really helps our podcast reach other English learners around the world.
It really does. And please leave your grammar questions in the comments. We read and reply to all of them. Anyway, back to our tenses. That is such an important distinction. I have been going to the gym is my recent habit, my recent activity. But if I say, I have gone to the gym 3 times this week, that feels different. Why is that?
Ooh, you just hit on a major rule. When we want to say how many times we have done something, we must use the present perfect simple. We say, I have gone to the gym 3 times this week, or I have read 3 chapters. We never say, I have been reading 3 chapters, or I have been going to the gym 3 times. It just sounds wrong in English.
Oh, really? Why is that? Why can't we use the continuous form with numbers?
Because the continuous form is all about the continuous flow of the action. It doesn't combine well with specific numbers or quantities. Numbers like 3 times or 5 books are about completed units, completed results. And remember, results belong to the present perfect simple.
Perfect simple. So, I have been drinking coffee all morning focuses on the continuous action of drinking. But I have drunk 3 cups of coffee focuses on the quantity, the result.
Exactly. You would never say, I have been drinking 3 cups of coffee today. That sounds like you are trying to drink 3 cups at the exact same time, which would be very messy and probably give you a massive headache.
That would be super messy indeed. So we use this simple form for results and numbers, and the continuous form for the process and the time spent. But what about words that describe feelings, thoughts, or things that aren't physical actions? For example, the verb to know or to like.
You were talking about state verbs, sometimes called non-action verbs. This is one of the biggest traps for English learners, so I am really glad you brought it up. State verbs represent a state of being, not an active physical action. Examples include know, like, love, believe, own, or understand.
Right, because you don't actively do them in the same way you run, cook, or write. But why are they a trap for this grammar point?
Because state verbs almost never go into any continuous form. Not the present continuous and definitely not the present perfect continuous. We cannot say, I have been knowing him for 5 years, or I have been liking this song since yesterday.
Oh, I hear people make that mistake all the time. It sounds so natural to them because they think, well, the knowing started 5 years ago and it is still happening now, so it must be continuous, but it's actually incorrect, right?
Exactly. Even though the state continues into the present, the verb itself cannot take the ing form in this context. So we must use the present perfect simple. We say, I have known him for 5 years, or I have liked this song since yesterday.
That makes so much sense. Let me try another one. What about belong? If I bought a house 10 years ago and I still own it, I should say this house has belonged to me for 10 years. Correct?
Spot on, Hannah. You would never say, this house has been belonging to me. It sounds really unnatural. Another common one is the verb to want. You should say, I have wanted to visit Japan for a long time, not I have been wanting to visit Japan. Now, to be completely honest, in casual spoken English, you might occasionally hear native speakers say, I've been wanting. But for learners and exams, stick to the simple form. It is always safe and grammatically correct.
That is a great tip. Keep it simple. If it's a state verb, just use the present perfect simple. But what about verbs like live or work? They feel a bit like both, don't they? I mean, living in a city is a state, but it's also something we actively do.
You have a great grammatical instinct, Hana. Yes, live and work are very special verbs in English. They are often called temporary permanent verbs. With live and work, there is actually very little difference in meaning between the simple and continuous forms when we talk about a period of time up to now.
Wait, really? So I can say both, and they both mean the same thing?
Yes, absolutely. You can say, I have lived in London for 3 years, or you can say, I have been living in London for 3 years. Both are perfectly correct, and native speakers use both of them all the time without any real difference in meaning.
Wow, that is actually a relief, so I don't have to stress too much about choosing between them for live and work. What about study?
Yes, study is very similar. I have studied English for 2 years, and I have been studying English for 2 years are both excellent. However, there is a very tiny nuance if you really look closely. Sometimes the continuous form feels a bit more temporary, while the simple form feels a bit more permanent.
Can you give us an example of that tiny nuance? I want to make sure I really get it.
Of course, if I say I have lived in Spain all my life, it feels very permanent. For that, the present perfect simple is perfect. But if I am just staying in Madrid for a 3-month project, I might say, I have been living in Madrid for 2 months. It emphasizes that this is a temporary situation that is currently ongoing.
Ah, I see. So the continuous form, I have been living, gives it that temporary active flavor, while I have lived feels more established and permanent. That is a very helpful way to think about it.
Exactly. Let's do a quick recap to make sure our listeners are following. We use the present perfect simple when we focus on the result, when we want to say how much or how many times something happened, and with state verbs like know, like, and believe. We use the present perfect continuous when we want to focus on the duration of an ongoing activity, the process itself, or when we see the physical evidence of a very recent activity like wet hair or muddy shoes, hands covered in flour.
This is so clear now. I used to get so confused, but breaking it down into results versus process and keeping an eye out for those state verbs makes it so much easier. But Alex, I have one more question. What about the words since and for? Do they change depending on which tense we use?
That is another classic question. The short answer is no. Since and for work exactly the same way with both tenses. We use for to talk about a duration of time, like for 3 hours, for 5 years, or for a long time. And we use since to point to a specific starting moment in the past, like since 9 a.m., since Monday, or since I was a child.
So I can say, I have been working here since 2020, or I have worked here since 2020. Both work perfectly because work is one of those flexible verbs, and since just tells us when it started.
Precisely. The time markers since and for don't care if the verb is simple or continuous. They only care about how you are measuring the time.
That makes so much sense. But let's talk about some verbs where the choice between the simple and continuous actually changes the meaning, like work or read. If I say, I have read that book, versus I have been reading that book, they don't mean the same thing at all, do they?
You are absolutely right. This is where the difference between completed action and ongoing process becomes super clear. Let's look at your first example. I have read that book. This is the present perfect simple. What does it mean to you, Hana?
Well, it means I finished it. The book is closed, I know the ending, and the action is 100% complete. I might have finished it yesterday or 5 years ago, but the job is done.
Perfect. It is a completed result. Now, what if you say, I have been reading that book?
That feels like I am still in the middle of it. Maybe I started it last week, and I'm on page 150 right now. I haven't finished it yet, but it is my current activity. I might even have the book open on my desk right now.
Spot on. I have been reading focuses on the activity itself and how I have spent my time recently. It doesn't tell us if the book is finished. In fact, it usually implies it is not finished. Let's try another one with paint. Imagine your friend walks into your living room. What is the difference if you say, I have painted my living room versus I have been painting my living room?
Ooh, I love this example. If I say, I have painted my living room,
It means the walls are dry, the brushes are washed, and the room looks beautiful and complete. The project is finished. But if I say, I have been painting my living room, my friend will probably see wet paint, drop cloths on the floor, and maybe a smudge of blue paint on my nose.
Exactly. The continuous version focuses on the activity that was happening recently, and we can see the physical evidence of it right now. Even if I just stopped 5 minutes ago, the activity explains my messy clothes and the smell of paint in the air. The focus is on the process, not a finished, polished result.
This is a great shortcut for learners. If you want to show the results of your hard work, use the simple form. I have written 3 emails. If you want to explain why you look exhausted or how you spent your afternoon, use the continuous. I have been writing emails all afternoon.
Yes, and look at how you naturally use numbers there, Hana. You said, I have written 3 emails. This is a huge rule of thumb. Whenever we mention how many times we did something or how many things we completed, we must use the present perfect simple. We cannot use the continuous for numbers of completed things.
Let's highlight that. So I can never say, I have been writing 3 emails.
Right, that sounds very strange to a native speaker, because the continuous form is about the continuous flow of the action, not the separate completed packages. You would say, I have been writing emails, no number, or I have written 3 emails. Let's try another one. How would you say it with cups of coffee?
Okay, let me try. If I want to say how much coffee I drank today, I would say, I have drunk 4 cups of coffee today. I use the simple form have drunk because of the number 4.
Exactly. And what if you want to focus on the action of drinking coffee because you feel very jittery and energetic right now?
Then I would say, I have been drinking coffee all day. No numbers, just focusing on the continuous habit of drinking coffee from morning until now.
That is a perfect contrast. I have drunk 4 cups versus I have been drinking coffee all day. Our listeners can really hear the difference in focus there. One is about quantity and results. The other is about duration and the ongoing activity.
This makes me think of another common mistake. Sometimes I hear people say things like, I have been knowing him for 10 years. Now, based on what we discussed earlier about state verbs, that is incorrect, right?
Yes, that is a very common error. Know is a state verb. It represents a state of mind, not an active process. You either know someone or you don't. You can't actively be knowing someone in progress. So even though it started in the past and continues to now, we must use the simple form, I have known him for 10 years.
What about the verb have when it means possession? Like, I have had this car for a long time versus I have been having this car.
Same rule applies. When have means to own or to possess, it is a state verb. So you must say, I have had this car for 5 years. You cannot say, I have been having this car. However, remember that have can sometimes be an active verb, like have lunch or have a shower.
Oh, right. So I can say, I have been having lunch with my sister, which is why I didn't answer your call.
Yes, absolutely, because having lunch is an action, an event that takes time. It is not about ownership. That is a brilliant distinction, Hana.
I am so glad that makes sense. But now, Alex, my brain is ready for a real challenge. I want to see if I can actually choose the right one without pausing for 5 minutes to think about state verbs and actions. Can we do a quick practice game?
I love that idea. Let's do a quick fire quiz. I will give you a situation or a sentence with a blank, and you have to choose whether to use the present perfect simple or the present perfect continuous. And for everyone listening at home or on your commute, try to guess the answer before Hana says it.
Oh, the pressure is on. Okay, I am ready. Give me the first one.
Here we go. Situation number 1. You see your friend, and her hands are covered in green paint. You want to ask her what she was doing. Do you say, what have you painted? Or, what have you been painting?
Ooh, let me think. Her hands are covered in paint right now. This is a visible result of a recent activity.
The activity of painting is what caused the mess, and the painting itself might not even be finished yet. So it should be the continuous form. What have you been painting?
Spot on. That is exactly right. You care about the action that caused the messy hands. Now, what if you walk into her living room, the walls are beautifully green, and she is smiling? You want to ask about the completed result. What do you say?
Now the job is done. The room is finished, so I should use the simple form. Wow, have you painted the whole room?
Perfect. You are 2 for 2. Let's try another one. This is a very common everyday situation. You are waiting for a bus. You arrived at the bus stop 30 minutes ago, and the bus is still not here. Do you say, I have waited for 30 minutes, or I have been waiting for 30 minutes?
This is definitely I have been waiting for 30 minutes because the waiting is an ongoing, continuous action, and I am still waiting right now. It feels very active and, honestly, quite annoying.
Exactly. It emphasizes the duration of this continuous, frustrating action. Now, what if the bus finally arrives? You get on, and you want to tell the driver how long you stood there. You might say, I have been waiting for 30 minutes, but what if you want to emphasize the fact, the completed waiting?
Actually, once you are on the bus, the waiting is finished. But because it just stopped, you could still say, I've been waiting.
However, if you're talking about the number of times you tried to catch the bus this week, you would say, I have taken the bus 3 times this week, right?
Yes, brilliant. 3 times is a quantity, a number of completed events. So you must use the simple form. I have taken the bus 3 times this week. You can never say, I have been taking the bus 3 times. That would sound very strange indeed.
Okay, this is getting easier. Let's do one with a state verb to see if I can catch myself making a mistake.
Great. Here is the situation. You met your best friend Sarah in school when you were 10 years old. You are still friends today. Do you say, I have been knowing Sarah since school, or I have known Sarah since school?
Aha! You tried to trick me, but I remember. Know is a state verb. Even though it is a long, continuous state of friendship, I cannot use the ing form. So the correct sentence is, I have known Sarah since school.
You nailed it, Hana. No tricking you today. Let's do one more. Imagine you are a big reader. You love books. You started a very thick book last Monday. You are on page 300. How do you describe this using the verb read?
Ooh, this is a double one. I can say both, but they mean different things, right? If I want to talk about the activity of reading this week, I say, I have been reading a great book this week. But if I want to focus on the page number, the progress I made, I say, I have read 300 pages so far.
That is absolutely perfect. You have completely mastered this. I have been reading focuses on the activity over the last few days. I have read 300 pages focuses on the completed result or quantity. You should be very proud of yourself, Hannah.
Thank you, Alex. I actually feel so much more confident now. It is amazing how just focusing on activity versus result and state versus action makes the choice so much clearer. I hope our listeners feel the same way too.
I am sure they do. Grammar can feel like a mountain sometimes. But when you break it down into these little real-life patterns, it becomes something you can actually use naturally. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of the Easy English Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and for playing along with the quiz. Keep practicing your present perfect, simple, and continuous in your daily life.